right. You had a good intro, so I'll just say my name. I'll let you give the intro. I'll hit the little dreamy button, though.
This is Jacob.
And this is Grace.
And today we're talking about our dream final. Welcome to the last day of class. Let's talk about what our ideal final would be. What the format, the structure, the idea behind the final examination would best suit us as students, and also allow professors, instructors to feel like they properly assess their students. So, my ideal dream final exam setup. I'm like really hyping this up. I actually, before I even knew that we were making this episode, I like gushed to my friends about this dream that I had. It was literally like I was, you know, in that like phase where you're about to wake up and you're like kind of dreaming, but like you kind of also know that you're like thinking, if that makes sense. You're like in the middle stage. That's where this thought came. I was like, all right, the way that I want to take a final exam, like the ideal situation for me is I would have an office hours appointment with my professor, and my professor would, in conversation, bring each of the questions to me, like literally say them, and I would solve them collaboratively with the professor, and we would talk through the problem, and I would like demonstrate my understanding. And then at the end of each little problem that we solved together, we would then grade me together. So then we would know, like as I walk out of the room, I would know how well I did because I literally was there grading myself as I did this exam in like a collaborative way. This is like my ideal. I was telling this idea to a group of my friends, and they all immediately were like, absolutely not. I would never want to do something like that. I don't want to have that stress and pressure of talking to my professor like that in the moment, knowing that my whole grade rests on this moment. And like, no, I would prefer to do something else. So that's where option 2 comes in. Option 2 is an independent project. This, I feel like a lot of people have done in one class or another, where the professor says, okay, you can go out and make a video or a podcast, or, you know, conduct a sort of research survey and write a short paper about how it ties into this class or whatever. You know how those professors will sometimes be like, go design a project. Just make sure, like, clear it with me first, but like do whatever you want and then I'll grade it. That would be option 2. And then option 3 would be a written exam in the classic way. And it might even be timed. It's like, yeah, okay, if you really want to sit down and like do this exam, sure, I'll write you an exam and you can sit down and take it. And we were talking about public exams just a few minutes ago. Be cool if it was a public exam. But, you know, actually, if they gave the public exam out before the exam actually took place, that would be really cool, because then you could decide. You'd be like, okay, do I want to take this exam, or do I want to go talk to the professor in person? Or like, I don't want to talk about those questions. I'm going to go make a really cool independent project and prove my knowledge in other ways.
See, it's funny because here you've got like these 3 options. I just held up 2 fingers for those who can't see, but 3 options, and I know myself, and I would be a number 2 option all the way. When it comes to final exams and my time in undergrad, am a huge fan. I don't even like to clear it with the professor. I like the wow factor. I want to shock, amaze, stupefy my professor. I want them to be speechless. I want them to be amazed at what I have come up with in this final exam. When I reflect on my time in undergrad and my all-time favorite final exams, they are the ones in which the professor basically said to me, okay, yeah, do whatever you want to do. And I said, yes, I am going to do something that you've never seen before, definitely something you've never heard before, and it is going to knock your socks off.
Hell yeah.
And I have done, let's see, now we're going to get a quick rundown of Grace's favorite final exams that she's ever done.
Just a little context for our dear listeners. Grace, you were a film and media studies major, right?
I was also an English major.
Okay. So that I just want to like point that out, that you were intentionally specializing in like multimedia production.
Yes, I was, which I recognize is very different. And I think especially when we talk about final exams, a lot of these things, especially when it comes to open exams and being an English major, that was a majority of my examination experience is we would talk about and discuss the questions that we would have and the nature of the exam before we would have the exam. That's just kind of how a lot of English exams function.
Right.
It would be kind of like, hey, we're going to discuss these themes. You get to pick which novel you want to apply them to. This is the question. Think about the novels we've read, and then you'll write your response on a novel of your choice.
Right.
So that kind of, I definitely think a lot of humanities classes kind of cater themselves naturally to that kind of forum. Which, you know, I recognize in a way, like, that was just my experience, you know, the thought. And I definitely, thinking back to high school, I remember taking exams where, like, I would walk in and just have to sit down and pencil on paper for an hour and a half and just hope that I remember how differential equations work.
Right.
But that being said, I know my mind works better when I can be more creative. So I really appreciate a more open exam and just being able to be more creative. So yes, my experience has been more in multimedia, but I've also taken a bunch of different courses in the anthropology department, in the music department, and one of my favorite final exams that I got to take was I had to create a soundscape, and that was the only instructions that I was given. It was for a music class. My professor was like, go crazy, do whatever you want. You just have to use electronic means to create a soundscape. And so I had been able to visit the Met over spring break, and I had found a piece of modern art that really spoke to me. And so I decided to do an animated sequence where I took the painting and I manually animated it, and I made it so that each piece of the painting had a sound effect to it.
Wow.
And so as you watch this painting, I had it really zoomed in at first. And as it panned across the painting, the sounds like added together. And as you zoomed out, they all created a song. Wow. And so like the painting would move, and as the painting would move and the people in the painting danced, the music would grow. As I zoomed in, sounds would fade away. As I zoomed out, more sounds were added. And it was by far probably one of my favorite final exam pieces. But it was something that I was really able to showcase my understanding of the course, because it was an electronic music course, but also my understanding across disciplines in a way that just really allowed me to show like a whole new body of knowledge that I wouldn't have been able to do had it been a more traditional like sit-down exam.
Sure. Yeah. That sounds like a really cool project. And was it the final product like a video or like a website? What sort of interaction was there?
It was a video.
Okay, cool.
But it could have been a multitude of different platforms.
Yeah. No, that's giving me some ideas. That's a really interesting way of like presenting a work of art, but also really anything, and sort of adding your own interpretation or like your own sort of art to it. That's really cool. Yeah. So I feel like that is the primary example of like, not primary, that is like a prime example of what a like standout multimedia project could look like. One of those number twos. And I have those friends I was talking about who, you know, we really did have this conversation. I'm not making this up. They were like, no, I want to take that written exam. Like, I do better on a written exam. I want a prompt, and I want to write like by hand an answer to it. This is why there's 3 options. Genuinely, there are examples of students who would prefer to do any of those 3.
Yeah. No, and I think something else that's kind of key, and I was actually talking about this earlier today. I was meditating on all of the conversations that I've been listening to. I think a lot of anxiety comes from final exams is like this means of like, oh my gosh, like I have to perform, I have to like somehow regurgitate information, I have to like spew stuff out of me. Whereas Heather said something that really stood out to me. A final exam is a learning experience.
Yeah.
This should be another like instance in which we are learning. We're soaking stuff up. Like, yes, we are also demonstrating our knowledge, but it shouldn't necessarily be a point of anxiety or something that is feared. It should just kind of be, I don't know, like how do we reframe that so that a final exam can be just another point of us learning as opposed to something that we dread? Like, how can we change our viewpoint so that the final exam is like a reward or like a finish line, like something that we've worked towards and we're excited to get to, as opposed to something that we're like dreading?
Totally. I think that, to me, that goes right down to the definition of a class or a course. Like, what is a course? It's like this, communally decided meeting time, usually in a specific place where like people come together and they talk about stuff. The instructor is usually leading the course and they present their goals for what's going to be discussed. Some of them are really insistent that they will lecture everyone else every single class, or maybe they're a little bit more seminar style, whatever it is. Like, there are these really strange sort of contracts that we all enter in, and they're all the same length, right? Like, it's always these 3-4 months that we all just like do this together. And I don't know if it's my ADHD or this is just like the way I look at the world, but that is a really long time for me. Like, I have trouble being in the same, like, let's talk about this topic for like 4 months. That's like a lot for me. And I feel like at the end of every semester so far in my life, I've always just felt really disappointed at the end. It's like, wow, we like dragged ourselves all the way through this like very in-depth curriculum of this topic, and now we're all just sitting quietly and filling out these little forms, like, it's like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? This doesn't feel like the culmination that I want. Like, I want some sort of bow at the end, like, wow, we really did that together. Let's talk about it. Like, let's put our feelings on the table about sedimentology or whatever, you know what I mean? I guess that's kind of what I want when I walk into a professor's office hours and take the final exam with them, is I can be like, wow, that's weird, but like, I think I know how to do that. Let's try it, or something like that. I kind of want to add that sense of personality and like human connection that I feel like has to be there no matter what, but we sometimes intentionally ignore.
No, I 100% agree with you. And I think the courses that I've taken, that I've walked away from, that I've felt the most satisfied, that I feel like have impacted me the most as a student and as a person, are the courses, and I would consider myself a creative. I'm someone, that's how my brain works. That's where I feel most fulfilled. But are the courses that at the end of the semester, all of us have created something.
Yeah.
Going back to that one class that I was talking about where I created that animated painting.
Yeah.
Other students in the class, that course actually happened over when COVID first hit. And initially, it was an electronic music course. We were supposed to be learning how to use modular synthesizers, working with editing sound and music electronically, and kind of expanding our definition of what music could be, looking at noise as a genre, different things like that. However, our professor was very flexible, and as the pandemic unfolded, allowed us to kind of expand even the course's goals into, okay, now we're on Zoom, now we're online. How does sound, how does Zoom, how does all of this stuff impact our understanding of music, of sound, of the world around us?
Yeah.
And all the students, all of the projects we would share as we went through this course, just different projects. I remember one student, she was living in New York, and every day she recorded the mayor giving updates on the new numbers of COVID cases as they came into the city. And she incorporated that into her final music piece that she shared.
Wow.
And so, it felt like we were taking stuff away, because as the course progressed, we were taking the world around us as well as what we were learning in the class, and we were adding to it. It wasn't so strict and stuck to, this is the paper syllabi, like, this is what we've said, this is it.
Right.
It was like, this is a learning experience, and as the world changes around us, our experience is going to change, and so this class is going to change. But at the end of the day, like, the goal is that you're going to take something away from this experience.
Yeah.
We're going to teach each other, and like, we're going to come away like having learned new skills that can carry us further than just this class. And that's truly what learning is.
Yeah. Yeah. And hearing you say that, I feel like one of the key components there is making it about the students just as much as it's about the instructor. Like they have to be at the table, not just listening, but also contributing and creating in response to the things that they're learning.